All children are born atheists. They have no idea of God. The source of man's unhappiness is his ignorance of nature. The unhappiness of people is due to their ignorance of nature. All religions are ancient monuments to superstition, ignorance, and ferocity. Tolerance and freedom of thought are the veritable antidotes to religious fanaticism. If the ignorance of nature gave birth to gods, the knowledge of nature is calculated to destroy them. It is only by dispelling the clouds and phantoms of religion that we shall discover truth, reason, and morality. It is thus superstition infatuates man from his infancy, fills him with vanity, and enslaves him with fanaticism. The atheist destroys the chimeras which afflict the human race, and so leads men back to nature, to experience, and to reason. All religious notions are uniformly founded on authority. All the religions of the world forbid examination, and are not disposed that men should reason upon them. Nature, you say, is totally inexplicable without a God. That is to say, to explain what you understand very little, you have need of a cause which you understand not at all. Savage and furious nations, perpetually at war, adore under diverse names some God conformable to their ideas, that is to say, cruel, carnivorous, selfish, bloodthirsty. The universe, that vast assemblage of everything that exists, presents only matter and motion. The whole offers to our contemplation nothing but an immense, an uninterrupted succession of causes and effects. When we examine the opinions of men, we find that nothing is more uncommon than common sense. Or, in other words, they lack judgment to discover plain truths, or to reject absurdities and palpable contradictions. If the ministers of the Church have often permitted nations to revolt for heaven's cause, they never allowed them to revolt against real evils or known violences. It is from heaven that the chains have come to fetter the minds of mortals. If we go back to the beginnings of things, we shall always find that ignorance and fear created the gods, that imagination, rapture, and deception embellished them, that weakness worships them, that custom spares them, and that tyranny favors them in order to profit from the blindness of men. Men always fool themselves when they give up experience for systems born of the imagination. Man is the work of nature, he exists in nature, he is subject to its laws, he cannot break free, he cannot leave even in thought. It is in vain that his spirit wants to soar beyond the bounds of the visible world, he is always forced to return. Suns are extinguished or become corrupted, planets perish and scatter across the wastes of the sky, other suns are kindled, new planets form to make their revolutions or describe new orbits, and man, an infinitely minute part of a globe which itself is only an imperceptible point in the immense whole, believes that the universe is made for himself. What, indeed, is an atheist? He is one who destroys delusions which are harmful to humanity in order to lead men back to nature, to reality, to reason. He is a thinker who, having reflected on the nature of matter, its energy, properties, and ways of acting, has no need of idealized powers or imaginary intelligences to explain the phenomena of the universe and the operations of nature. It is thus religion infatuates man from his infancy, fills him with vanity and fanaticism. If he has a heated imagination, it drives him on to fury. If he has activity, it makes him a madman, who is frequently as cruel to himself, as he is dangerous and incommodious to others. If, on the contrary, he be phlegmatic or of a slothful habit, he becomes melancholy and is useless to society. Religion has ever filled the mind of man with darkness, and kept him in ignorance of his real duties and true interests. It is by dispelling the clouds and phantoms of religion that we shall discover truth, morality, and reason. Religion diverts us from the causes of evils, and from these remedies which nature advocates, far from curing. It only aggravates, perpetuates, and multiplies them. People have suffered and become insane for centuries by the thought of eternal punishment after death. Wouldn't it be better to depend on blind matter than a God who puts out traps for people, invites them to sin, and allows them to sin and commit crimes he could prevent, only to finally get the barbarian pleasure to punish them in an excessive way, of no use for himself, without them changing their ways, and without their example preventing others from committing crimes. The inward persuasion that we are free to do or not to do a thing is but a mere illusion. If we trace the true principle of our actions, we shall find that they are always necessary consequences of our volitions and desires, which are never in our power. You think yourself free because you do what you will, but are you free to will or not to will, to desire or not to desire? Are not your volitions and desires necessarily excited by objects or qualities totally independent of you? The Jehovah of the Jews is a suspicious tyrant, who breathes nothing but blood, murder, and carnage, and who demands that they should nourish him with the vapors of animals. The Jupiter of the pagans is a lascivious monster. The Moloch of the Phoenicians is a cannibal. The pure mind of the Christians resolved, in order to appease his fury, to crucify his own son. The savage god of the Mexicans cannot be satisfied without thousands of mortals which are immolated to his sanguinary appetite. How could the human mind progress, while tormented with frightful phantoms and guided by men, interested in perpetuating its ignorance and fears? Man has been forced to vegetate in his primitive stupidity. He has been taught stories about invisible powers upon whom his happiness was supposed to depend. Occupied solely by his fears, and by unintelligible reveries, he has always been at the mercy of priests, who have reserved to themselves the right of thinking for him, and of directing his actions.